Welcome to Metapod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of Metapod, Ron Crabtree.
Okay, it's Ron Crabtree. I'm your host of the Metapod series, and we've got a pretty interesting topic we're going to dive into around this general theme of Supply Chain 2030 and generically what all organizations should be thinking about with respect to developing capabilities going into the future. So this is really an important episode for you if you'd like to understand better about, purchasing power, managing commodities, cost engineering, and some of these important aspects that are crucial going forward with the ever-changing environment that we're facing as businesses going into the next decade. Now, I'm really pleased to have Mike Wynn with us. He's with Advanced Purchasing Dynamics out of Metro Detroit. I've actually known Mike for a number of years. We've collaborated on many different things. And I found him to be an immense well of knowledge and information around how do we tackle big challenges when it comes to procurement and supply management. So we'll do this podcast as usual. We'll start with the diagnostic. I've asked Mike to think about three crucial areas when we think about sourcing, procurement, and purchasing strategy. Three key areas from his perspective that are important skill areas for organizations. And start with the diagnostic. What is that? What is it all about? How do we determine if that's something we need to do something about? What are we looking for? What are the questions we need to ask? So we're really clear about what the diagnostic is, and then we're going to pivot in the last half of our podcast and focus it on, great, so what do you do? As a practical matter, if you've determined you have challenges, opportunities, threats, what do we do to improve performance in the future? So with that, Mike, could you share a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. So Mike Wynn with Advanced Purchasing Dynamics and the Vice President. I head up our optimal sourcing group, which really focuses on helping manufacturers drive costs that can be implemented short term. So a lot of large companies I've worked with, large manufacturers, focus on strategic sourcing of these projects that are sometimes 2-3 years long to optimize costs. But we find that medium-sized manufacturers, maybe 100 million to a billion, they don't have 2 or 3 years, and they don't have the team to dedicate to that. So we really help them drive costs in as little as 14 weeks.
Oh, wow. Yeah, as a practical manner, I've found over the years that if you can't get something done inside 90 days, you have to question why you're even doing it because things change so quickly. And generally speaking, we just can't wait to see the impact to the bottom line. So thank you for that introduction. And so with that, let's pivot to, in your mind, Mike, what would be the top 3 diagnostics, areas of assessment organizations should look at generically, no matter what you do or what industry you're in. These are probably general areas we should be really looking hard at, facing all the change and all the issues that are going to be coming at us here in the next several years.
Yeah, that was a tough question you launched at me, Ron, because there's so many things that we look at. But I think to me, it boils down to probably the top 3. First one I think of is commodity or category knowledge. That is, we kind of have the philosophy that as buyers, we should know as much about the things we buy as the folks who supply to us. So we need to understand the materials and technology that's provided, the production process and the supply base. And really, you need this knowledge to make informed decisions about supplier capabilities, but also it helps you negotiate better terms with suppliers, and it ensures that the materials and services that you buy, that they meet the company's production needs.
All right, so let's pretend our audience knows nothing about purchasing. You just said an important thing there. Can you define what you mean when you talk about category knowledge? Give us a few more specifics or maybe an example. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a fair question. So the first thing is materials, right? Materials and the technology that's used. So let's say you're buying plastic parts from an injection molder. Do you understand the materials that injection molder uses and can use, right, to produce the parts for you? The second would be the production process. Do you understand really down to the cost drivers of their production process? And the third is the potential supply base. Who are all the capable suppliers that really could be a fit for your organization that you might want to consider?
Okay, cool. So what kinds of questions should we ask, and what should we be looking at to determine whether or not category management is an area we should dive into?
Yeah, good question. There's a simple exercise you can go through. It's simple if you have the information at your fingertips, but it's worth gathering information And so if you want to determine which commodities or categories there might be a potential or an opportunity to reduce costs, the first thing you do is just make a list of all the categories that your company buys, both indirect spend and direct materials. And then you want to make a column that shows just how much spend there is for each of those commodities or categories. And be careful to think about controllable spend. A lot of folks, a lot of manufacturers have to buy certain materials from specific suppliers that their customers specify, and their customers set the price. So that's not a controllable spend. You don't need to worry about that. So now you've got your list of all the categories of commodities, and you've got them, if you want to rank them from the highest spend to the lowest spend, focus on a controllable spend, then you can make a column. What's the materials knowledge, the production process knowledge, and the supply base knowledge that your team has, and rate each of those. And you'll find that there's probably some where that knowledge is like, and there's enough controllable spend that there's a savings opportunity. Our rule of thumb is if you've got $2 million in controllable spend that you're not managing closely because you don't have that commodity knowledge, there's probably a six-figure savings opportunity there for you.
Yikes. Let me ask a question here. Larger organizations in particular might have a lot of stuff to look at. Would you advise they also think about, with respect to prioritizing, let's just pretend that, you've got 20 categories and we don't have the time and energy to fix them all. Would you also try to filter out what's strategic? What part of the business do we expect to grow? Where do we see potential threats of supply coming down the line? Would you add any other filters, that help prioritize which categories go first?
Yeah, there's something called the Kralik matrix. It's been around for 20 or 30 years that purchasing professionals use. On one axis, they look at what is the opportunity in the supply base. So now we're combining two of these factors, but what is the opportunity? So are there many suppliers that can provide what you need, or are there only a few because what you're buying is specialized enough? And then the other axis is what's the strategic impact to the business? And that's kind of a combination of the controllable spending, because that's dollars, but also does it impact your company's strategy, your go-to-market strategy, your competitive advantage?
Perfect. Exactly. Well, that was wonderful. That gave me a lot of good tips here, and for the novice and even for the professional who's been around a while. God, what's that important checklist to assess and determine whether or not we need to be building competencies in the area of category management? So why don't we pivot to the next diagnostic?
Yeah, the next one I think of as cost engineering. So companies need cost engineering expertise to manage and control costs of purchased materials. It's pretty straightforward, right? And really, for manufacturing, you need more advanced cost engineering skills like cost modeling, total cost of ownership analysis, and how to drive cost reductions, right? Those are keys to ensuring cost competitiveness.
So let me ask you a question here. What would I, if this pretend I'm the CEO of a company, I'm not familiar with all this good stuff, what questions would I ask to determine whether or not we even have cost engineering effectively in play?
Yeah.
What are the measures, metrics? How did I uncover whether or not there's a big opportunity around cost engineering?
Yeah, good questions. There's some simple rules of thumb, right? So if you're buying a commodity based on piece price, right, you don't get any cost information from your suppliers, there's typically an 8 to 18% savings opportunity because you're just not applying any cost engineering capability to it. Whether you have that capability or not, you're not applying, right? If you are getting cost breakdowns, there's probably a 6 to 16% savings opportunity. Again, you're not doing much with that data because the continuum is piece price, buying up piece price, getting some cost breakdowns, and developing cost models. So if you're developing cost models for the things that you buy, then you know you've got a good competency in cost engineering.
All right. So I'm the CEO of a company. I'm going to walk down to purchasing, ask a question. What kind of question would I ask to uncover the degree to which we're successfully and effectively using cost modeling? What am I probing for? If I'm a novice, I don't know what I'm looking for.
Unfortunately, cost engineering skills are something that are in short supply in a lot of manufacturers, especially mid-sized manufacturers. What we find is that people are buying way too much on piece price. They're not even attempting to get any knowledge about the costs of their suppliers. So if you're not managing your supplier's costs, all you can do is beat them up on price. And that kind of puts you in a situation where you're at war with your supply base, right? Just a continual ground war with the folks that really hold the keys to your success. Suppliers should be partners, and cost transparency is one element of that partnership.
All right. So give me a ruler for this. If I'm the CEO walking down the hall, I mean, is it 5% of the things I'm buying? Is it 75%? Are there any basic rules of thumb of, what percentage of the stuff we're buying really should be looked at with a cost engineering filter? Is there any rule of thumb for that?
That's a really good question, Ron. And what I'm thinking about is that the companies that we tend to consult for are usually doing a very good job on the commodities that make up about 80% of their spend. It's the old 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the category that you buy make up 80% of your spend. Right. And that's typically where they're putting their shoulder to the wheel with cost engineering, applying cost engineering, and really developing that deep commodity knowledge. It's that next layer where there's still more than $2 million of controllable spend, but they aren't applying that information. That's what we find. Now, the folks that are out there in the entire world may have a different experience, but that's amongst our client base what I'm finding.
Okay, that's very interesting. So right off the bat, show me the data that proves to me we're actually applying cost engineering for the 20% of the stuff that's 80% of spend. That's the first thing I want to know. The next thing I want to know, so talk to me about what we're doing for that next layer, everything at, $2 million a year or more, $2 million a year that's not in that first bucket. Where are we at with that? Those would be good probing questions that the executive should be asking to determine how well we're currently leveraging that. And of course, certain other data or information around cost engineering you might look for if you're just trying to determine current capability. Anything at all?
Well, one thing that we often find is that there is cost engineering expertise within a manufacturing company, but it's attached to the sales side of the business.
Oh,
right. When manufacturers sell to other manufacturers, a tiered supply chain, their customers are asking for those cost breakdowns, and they're asking for information to develop cost models, right? That's just good practices in purchasing these days. And so a lot of times the sales team's been successful at saying, hey, we need this expertise so we can support our quoting process. But the purchasing team doesn't have that. So one question I'd ask is, do we have any cost engineers? And the second question is, are they reporting to sales or purchasing?
Wonderful. That's perfect. Exactly what I was hunting for here. And those little hidden gems that we can tap into. So that's the diagnostic too. What would be the third area of diagnostic that you would recommend for executives?
After what we've been through in the past 3 or 4 years, scenario planning is becoming a really big issue for large manufacturers that needs to trickle down to mid-sized manufacturers, right? So the risk management tool of creating detailed plans for potential factors that could impact your business, right? And it enables you to prepare for a range of potential futures.
All right. So I'm the novice executive. I'm not even sure how to ask the questions. Give us a little guidance here. I'm imagining that there's, again, the scenario plan, you can't do that for 100% of everything. So there's probably a hierarchy of what should we focus on first? So for me, it probably would be, what are the things we simply can't make product without, right? So if there's going to be supply chain disruption. Number 2, I'm just thinking out loud, you're going to tell us, number 2 is probably, where do we have a very few number of suppliers? If anything happens to one of them, we're in big trouble. What would be your filter for, again, I'm the executive. I really don't know a lot about purchasing the strategy. What should I be asking for and examining to determine whether or not we're doing this as well as we should?
You're right. So those factors that can affect supply continuity are big, 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 right? If we can't get the stuff that we need to make our widgets, we're out of business. And we kind of saw how that affected companies through this whole COVID and supply chain crisis. But the other big factor is costs, right? So inflation has been a big factor that has caused companies to realize that they're too reliant on China. For instance, we do a lot of business helping companies find suppliers in Mexico because they're too reliant on their Chinese suppliers. And with all the tariff situation, the strength of the dollar versus different currencies, sometimes China's not the best answer. Now that shipping has normalized, right? Ocean freight was such a mess for a long time. That was driving a lot of things. But people realized that, hey, we're really susceptible to these cost factors. And when the cost of a shipping a container went from $2,500 to $20,000. That really affected the cost effectiveness of sourcing to certain countries.
It did. So I'm the executive, don't know what this stuff means. What data or information, what am I asking to be shown so that I can determine whether or not we're effectively doing this? What should I be looking for? Reports and scenarios? What would a deliverable look like that I would want to look at to say, yeah, we're on top of this, or we need to work on it?
Yeah, good question, Ron. The first thing is to understand do we have supply chain risks in terms of pinch points because we're reliant on just one supplier or one region for something, right? A lot of these risks are region-based, whether it's wars or natural disasters. Those become issues. So that's the first question. The second thing I would ask is, okay, now that we understand that, where are we overly reliant on a region that could affect our costs? Let's say that all of a sudden the euro turns around and gets back that 30% buying power that's been lost in the past 6 months, and then continues on from there. What does that do to our buying profile and our profitability?
Okay, awesome. We've done a fantastic job of describing what the uninformed executive might be looking for to determine whether or not these three areas, those commodities, or category knowledge, cost engineering, scenario planning. So let's pivot to the most important part, of the podcast is, so what do you do? You've done the diagnostic, you've determined, yes, in fact, this is an area you need to build workforce skills, organizational capabilities, supply chain capabilities around these areas. Give us the meat, the tactical. So what do we do to attack that?
Okay. So the way I think about it is, if I do the analysis, discover which of the categories that we don't have good commodity knowledge on, and that's an moment, right? Okay, what do we do? Well, and if you want to resolve that in the short term, what I'd suggest is that you hire an expert. There's a lot of commodity experts out there, people who took early retirement or operated as a solo consultant. They tend to be expensive at $1 per hour basis, but we found that their knowledge is, sure, they might be 2 or 3 times the hourly rate of a generalist consultant for purchasing, but they're 10 times the value. And you can use them for just a little bit of information that you need from them, right? So we tap our network, or we use meta experts to find people who have the exact commodity knowledge and industry experience that we're looking for. Well, I guess something to think about with these commodity experts is they tend to be not a full service consultancy, right? We're looking at somebody who's got deep knowledge in resins, or deep knowledge in coiled stainless steel, right? Some very specific things. And you don't want to outsource your supplier selection or negotiations to them. You just want to tap them for their commodity knowledge. Yeah. Another thing you can do to fill the gap in commodity knowledge is to use AI chatbots like ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini. They can be pretty helpful when it comes to material and technology information, and they can help with the manufacturing process. Where I've found them not to be that helpful is in understanding the supply base, because manufacturers have very specific needs from suppliers, right? It's not enough to say, I'm looking for an injection mold supplier. There's about 10 other factors that you need to match up with to make sure a supplier is going to be a good fit for your company.
That's interesting. So are there like research databases, associations, resources out there that we could tap into for this sort of expertise?
There are, but I think that even those resources don't help you too much on the supply base. What I find that we have to do is we go through our process of developing an ideal supplier profile that has those 10 to 15 attributes that a company needs from their supplier. And then we find a broad range of suppliers and interview them. It only takes an hour, right? But then where do they fit relative to our ideal supplier profile? So it's a kind of a manual process, unfortunately.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it is what it is. And I spent many, many years working with a wide variety of companies and tough supply chains, automotive being one of the biggest, baddest supply chains on the planet. And everybody kind of can learn from that. So let's pivot. Let's talk about cost engineering. Let's say, okay, we've done the diagnostic. We definitely have a big area of opportunity to develop competencies for people or an organization or any suppliers for that matter. Yeah. what's the go-do on that?
Yeah, similar to commodity experts, there's people who have spent their whole careers as a cost engineer, right? And you can hire them for a project. You want to make sure that they have the experience in the relevant commodity industry, similar to our commodity experts, and that they've done the specific tests you're asking for. So if you're looking to develop a cost model for wire harnesses in the low volume, high mix environment like agriculture or commercial trucks, that's a lot different than somebody that would be knowledgeable at how to drive savings for wire harnesses for automotive, right? Just two very different things, even though they're both wire harnesses, right? Another thing you can do is you can send your buyers, your purchasing team to training courses to cover cost engineering skills. So, for example, we have an online cost management certification course that teaches the important cost engineering functions that a buyer should have to understand cost drivers, and even teaches them how to develop cost models to identify savings opportunities. So there's courses out there.
What's that course?
Oh, it's the cost management certification.
Oh, who puts that out?
Well, we do, Advanced Purchasing Dynamics. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it says, in fact, that's one of the things I want to make sure that for Audie at the end, we'll ask you to talk, get in touch with you. And so if there's an interest in building those competencies, that's something you guys could assist with. So thank you.
Absolutely. And then thinking about those AI chatbots, they're not as good at math as they are with words, right? These are large language models, and the way they work is they predict words. So when we apply math to them, sometimes we find that there's mistakes. I've read that there's anywhere from 10 to 20% error rates in their math. However, you could do some cost modeling things with ChatGPT's advanced data analysis feature, which, again, check the math, make sure that it's accurate. But you don't have to be an Excel whiz to do some of the things that are pretty advanced.
I imagine you got some models and some templates that go with that. Is some of that included in the cost management training program?
Yeah. Our cost management certification, people get best-in-class cost breakdowns, which leads to better cost models. So the key for cost modeling is getting the right information from your suppliers. And if you have a generic cost breakdown template that you're giving your suppliers, you're not going to get enough physical attribute information, for example, to be able to create a cost model. It's functional for it.
Right. And if I think APD's got some software on that, also a software product, is it Procure for us? And how would that fit in there?
Yeah, our Procure for software is an ERFQ platform that also does supplier portal and supports these cost breakdowns and cost model. So yeah, that's a big feature. That's a big leap for a lot of companies to move to the ERFQ platform that can do the cost modeling for them. But it's certainly something some of our customers are using.
All right, perfect. Let's pivot to the third area, and that's scenario planning. So how do we go about doing that right?
I think this is an area where those AI chatbots can be pretty useful, right? You can ask them to identify potential supply disruptions for a particular commodity in region, and then ask it to develop risk management strategies for what services. Now, it's not going to be as good as an expert in that commodity in that region, but is a heck of a starting point. And you can even ask it, what changes you should make if specific scenarios come to happen. So that's how you turn it into a scenario planning tools. So however you progress with scenario planning, I think what I'm seeing is that it's something that large companies used to do on an annual basis, and it's now becoming a quarterly exercise. The world is just so dynamic now, right? Supply chains are so integrated with the global supply base. We all want to source from low-cost countries whenever possible, but that creates a lot of risks. So that scenario planning becomes something that has to be done pretty frequently.
All right. So back to my premise, if you can't do it in 90 days, why are you doing it? A, and then B, then the part of the reason is things do change quarterly. So the assumptions that made sense, today may not be true 90 days from now. Some things have moved and pivoted, and so we've got to be able to be in front of that, on a dynamic basis so that we don't get caught short.
Absolutely. Have those plans on the shelf. That's what scenario planning is all about, is if certain things happen, you don't have to figure it out. You've already done the hard work of figuring it out. You can just implement your plans.
Awesome. So, Mike, that was fantastic, and you've over-delivered on my expectations. I really enjoyed, picked up a couple little gems here today I hadn't even thought about myself, so that was really good. in the future, if somebody want to get in contact with you to learn more or pick your brain about a challenge they're up against or whatever, how will people get in touch with you?
Our website is apurchasingd.com. That's the simplest way to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn at Mike Wynn at Advanced Purchasing Dynamics.
All right. Awesome. So with that, Mike, thanks for joining us. This was fantastic.
All right. Appreciate it, Ron.
All right. You take care.
Thank you for joining Metapod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.